Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So to begin this tutorial, I went ahead to fold my fabric into two and I made sure to iron interfacing on my fabric. So this will be for the front bodice of the corset. So I have on the fold 11 inches, and to get the neckline of the corset I'll be making use of my chest line. And to get my chest line, all I have to do is to divide my armhole of 17 into 2, that is 8.5, but I'll decrease the measurement by half an inch, that will be 8 inches. This is so because half an inch will be used to turn the neckline of the corset with the lining. And from that point, I'll go ahead and mark my shoulder to waist measurement of 17 inches along that area, and then I'll connect the lines together. Right below my waistline, I have an extension of 5 inches right there. So after that, on my chest line right there, I'll go ahead and mark a quarter of my bust circumference, that is 9.5 inches. So the rest of the measurement right there is 1.5, and that will be for my side seam. So on my waistline, I'll also mark a quarter of my waist circumference, that is 8 inches, and I'll add 1.5 inch for my side seam allowance. I will place the 8 inches that I took for my neckline, and from the start point of my measuring tape, I would mark 11 inches. This is my bust point line, and the reason why I'm marking this is so as to create the armhole curve. So after that, I would go inwards by 3 inches right there, but I'll make it 3.5. The extra half inch will be to hem the sides of the corset. On my bust point line, I would mark a quarter of my bust circumference, that is 9.5 inches, and I'll connect the line upwards to my chest line, which is also my neck depth. Then I'll go downwards by half an inch below my waistline, and from here I would connect downwards in a curved manner. So it depends on the kind of shape you want. And then I'll connect the side seam from my chest line down to my waistline. For the next step after this, you're going to need your cross chest measurement. So on my chest line, I would impute half of my across chest measurement. 13 divided by 2 is 6.5 inches. So to get your across chest, just measure from one armhole to the other. So after that, I would add half an inch to that measurement right there. This will be the side seam allowance to attach the sleeves to the armhole of the corset. From my chest line down to my bust point line is 3 inches. So from this point on my chest line where I marked my across chest measurement, I'm just creating a curve down to my bust point line. And then I'll go ahead and cut out my armhole like this. And after cutting out the armhole, I won't throw away this shape. I'll keep it for the back bodice of the corset. Then I'll go ahead and cut out this shape, and then I'll cut out the side seam of the bodice. I'll place a notch on the center of my chest line and center of my waistline. So I'll open up the bodice like this, and this is for the front. So for the back, I have marked out my 1 inch zipper allowance right there. And the difference between the front and back bodice is that the back bodice is bigger than the front by 1 inch because of the zipper allowance. So you can see that it is 12 inches in width. So just like I did for the front, 8.5 inches for my chest line, subtracting half an inch, that is 8 inches. And then from that point, I would mark my shoulder to waistline on the back. After connecting the lines together, I'll add half an inch downwards for the hem of the corset on the back part of the bodice. Then I'll bring back the shape that I cut out for my armhole and place it on the back like this, and I would use my scissors to cut out the shape. After that, I wanted to mention that I have 2 pieces for the back bodice. And now I'll go ahead and cut out the length that I need for my back bodice. Now I would mark a quarter of my waist circumference, that is 8 inches. And then I will add 1.5 inch for my side seam allowance. And I would place the front on the back like this, making sure that the center of the front is starting from where the zipper allowance of the back is, as you can see. And then I would cut out the side seam for the back. After cutting, I'll go ahead and open up the back, and the back bodice is ready. So I've gone ahead to cut out the lining for both the front and back bodice, and I ironed interfacing on my lining. So the back has two, and I'll be using the lining to turn the neckline of both the front and back by 1/2 inch. So I'll be making use of this my orange bias to create boning channels on the bodice like this, and so close to the edge of the bias tape. So I've gone ahead to create my boning lines, but I'll go over the lines. So starting from the point where I made a notch at the center of my waistline, I marked 1.5 inch away from that right there, and I also marked 1.5 inch away from that line like this. From the center of my chest line, I measured 4 inches inwards like this and connected the line downwards. And from this line right here, I marked 3.5 inches inwards and connected the line downwards. And from this point right here, I went inwards by 1.75 inch, and from here I went inwards by 2.25 inch and connected the lines together. So I repeated the same thing on this other side, 4 inches inwards, 1.5 inch downwards, connected the lines, then 3.5 inches inwards like this, and 1.5 inch inwards and connected the lines together. Then I also went in by 1.75 inch at this point and 2.25 inch at this point and connected the lines together. On the chest line on my back, I would mark 3 inches away from my zipper allowance line, and on my waistline I will mark 2.5 inches away from my zipper allowance, and I'll connect the lines together in a straight line like this. After that, I would mark 3 inches away from the initial line that I made like this, and also mark 2.5 inches away from the line on my waistline, and then connect the lines together to create the second boning channel for the back. So from this line too, I would also mark 3 inches away from that, and also 2.5 inches away from it at the lower part of the bodice, that is the waistline. I'll repeat exactly the same thing I did on this one on the second part of the back bodice. Then I'll place my bias tape like this along the lines that I've made and stitch very close to the edge so as to allow room for my boning. So I'll do the same thing for the back. So I've gone ahead to create my boning channels, and the next thing to do is to turn over the neckline of the corset with the lining by 1/2 inch. So I would place the front lining on the front bodice rather, and sew by 1/2 inch. So after sewing, I went ahead to give the neckline area a good press so it lays nice and flat. So that is for the back, and for the front I also did the same thing right there. So I've cut out the boning that I need for the channels. So these are the boning channels for the front bodies. So I'm just going ahead to insert the boning into the boning channel. So in order to know the right amount of boning to use or insert inside the boning channel, you have to measure where you want to insert the boning, and whatever you get, please make sure you subtract about 0.75 to 1 inch from that measurement to get the right amount of boning. I also cut out the boning for the back, so I'll go ahead and insert it into the channels. So I have inserted the boning into the back part of the bodice. So I'll place the side seam of the back on the side seam of the front, and I'll go ahead and sew like this by 1.5 inches. So this is what I have after sewing. Please make sure you overlock the raw edges along the armhole and along the side seam. Okay, so I would use my bias tape to finish the hem of the corset like this, starting from the zipper allowance area of the back, tracing my way like this all the way to the other part of the back where the zipper allowance is. After that, I will go ahead and sew my black zipper that has an open end on my zipper allowance of 1 inch at the back. So make sure the zipper you're using has an open end so you can easily wear the top. So this is what I mean by an open end. So the zipper easily opens up into two. So I'll go ahead and sew the zipper. So this is what the hem of the corset currently looks like, and I have sewn my zipper to the back of the top. So that will be all for the bodice for now. So we'll be moving on to the sleeves. So for the sleeves, I have gone ahead to draft a short basic sleeve. If you don't know how to draft a sleeve, I have a video for that, so you can check it out. So the current sleeve length I have here is 10 inches. So from the midpoint of both the front and back armhole curve, I would make a straight connection down to the center of the hem of the sleeve like this. And then I'll connect the center of the sleeve head to the center of the hem of the sleeve. And then I'll go ahead to cut out the sleeve pattern like this. This is because I am going to slash and spread the sleeve so as to increase the height, the length, the breadth, and the armhole curve of the sleeves. So to spread the sleeves, I would need to move on to a large workspace area, but before then I'm just labeling the back sleeve patterns as 1, 2, and 3, and the front as 4, 5, and 6. So it's very important that you label them so you don't mix them up. So like I said, I will be spreading the sleeves, so I would move to the floor, of course. So I'm on the floor and I'm using about 1.5 yards for my sleeve length, for my sleeve in general, and on fold I have 27 inches. So from the edge of my fabric, I just marked 26 inches downwards for the sleeve length, but I later on changed that to about 30 inches. So after connecting the points together, I'm just spreading out the sleeve patterns on my fabric like this. So if you want the sleeve to be very big, you need to use probably like 2 yards of fabric. So right here I am increasing the sleeve length, total sleeve length, to 30. 30 inches is like times 3 of the initial sleeve length of 10 inches. So I'm just placing number 6 and 5 in an angle on the 30 inches length for the sleeve and pinning them to the fabric so that they are well secured and in position. So I will also spread out number 5 this way and secure it to my fabric with my pin so it doesn't move. Then I'll measure the distance from number 5 to 6. Whatever I have, I'll measure the same thing from number 3 to 2, making sure that it is equal to that of number 5 and 6, and then I'll secure number 2 with my pins. Then I'll spread out number 4 this way, and just like I did for 5 and 6, I will measure 4 and 5. Whatever I have, I'll make sure that's the same distance between number 1 and 2. So if it's not the same, I would make the correction and secure 1 to the fabric. So I'm just making a straight line down to the hem of the sleeve like this. This will be for my side seam. And then from the side seam of number 3, I am just making an elongated version of my armhole curve. So watch as I do it. From number 6, I'm also doing the same thing. And I'm making sure that I sort of like raise the head of the sleeve at this point right here. So I'm also marking out the midpoint of both the front and back armhole curve, and I'm measuring the length of the side seam at the back part of the sleeve. So whatever I have, I'll make sure it's the same on the front part of the sleeve. So I just made the needed correction, and then I'll go ahead and cut out the new sleeve like this. After cutting out the sleeve, I folded it into 2 and made sure to trim out uneven edges around the head of the sleeve, and made a notch at the center of the head of the sleeve, and also at the hem of the sleeve I made a notch at the center. After that, I'm just going ahead to unpin the sleeve patterns from my new sleeve. So now I decided to decrease the length of the sleeve, so I'm just marking 1.5 inches upwards from the sleeve length, and I'll cut it out. After that, I went ahead to fold the sleeve into 2 and to notch the center point at the hem, and from that point I would go upwards by 3 inches. This is so that the center of the sleeve is not longer than the side of the sleeve. So I just made a curved shape between the 2 points, that is my side seam and the center of the hem of the sleeve, and then I cut out the shape. So it can go upwards way more than 3 inches from that point. So I gave that point a notch, and I'll be creating an elastic casing along the armhole of the sleeve to insert an elastic inside, and this will give the sleeve sort of like a ruche effect, as you can see me doing right here. I will also be making use of hard net to create the puff effect for the sleeves. So I have 3 different layers of hard net right here, and the first one is about 10 inches wide. So I'm sorry the measurement is not visible from this angle, but it is 10 inches wide, and I have about 8 layers of it. So the second is about 7 inches wide, and I have 4 layers of it right here. And for this one, it is about 6 inches wide, and I have 4 layers of it. And I used about 3 yards of hard net to create the puff effect for the sleeves. So I've gone ahead to cut out the 2 lining pieces for the sleeve, and I notched the center of the head and hem of the sleeves. At the midpoint of the back armhole curve, I just went ahead to notch it twice. I also notched the midpoint of the front armhole once. Then from the midpoint of my back armhole curve, I'm just going ahead to mark 2 inches all the way around the armhole curve of the sleeve. This is so as to create the space where I'll be pleating my hard net on, and also creating the casing for the elastic. Before pleating the net, I'm going ahead to just mark my side seam allowance of 1 inch on the 2 sides of the sleeves. So this is one layer of the 10-inch hard net that I cut. So I'll fold it into 2 like this. That'll be 5 inches on fold. And starting before my side seam, I would start making pleats like this, and I would take this to my sewing machine and sew the pleat all the way around the 2-inch line that I marked around the armhole curve, making sure that I stop before the side seam. So this is the first 4 layers of the 10-inch net. So I will be making use of 4 each for each of the sleeves. So I've gone ahead to pleat the nets along the armhole of the sleeves. While making the pleats, I made sure to concentrate a lot on the head of the sleeve. So I made about 3 layers of hard net right there, compared to here that I made just 2 layers of pleats. So I did the same thing on the head of the sleeve. After making the pleats, I went ahead to give this area a smooth curve to go along with the armhole curve. So next, I placed the good sides of both the lining and the main sleeve together, and I will be sewing along the armhole area from one side seam to the other by a 1/2 inch all the way around. After sewing, I will go ahead and top stitch the lining to the fabric very close to the edge so it stays intact. So I will do the same like this all the way round. So after top stitching, I will go ahead and create the elastic casing along the armhole curve of the sleeve. So what I'll do is to top stitch right on the stitch line that I made while pleating the hard net along the armhole curve of the sleeves. So I'll make sure that I do exactly the same thing here. So after top stitching, as you can see, the elastic casing has been made all the way down to the side seam. So for the elastic along the armhole, I would be subtracting about 3 inches from my elastic so that it stays firm, but I later changed this while making the sleeve. So right here, I'm just cutting out another piece of the 14-inch elastic, and using my safety pin, I'll go ahead and insert the elastic inside the elastic casing. So this is the reason why I said that 2 inches should be made before pleating the net along the armhole curve. So as I insert the elastic in the casing, I would secure the end of this elastic with my pin so that it stays intact. Then I'll keep on pushing the elastic through the casing. Make sure you take your time while doing this so that the safety pin does not get stuck into the hard nets. So when I get to the other end, I'll go ahead and top stitch right there. So I have made the top stitch, and as you can see, the elastic is in place. So at the other end of the elastic, I would take out my pins and just gently release the elastic inside the casing, gently, so that I don't lose the elastic. So once I have done that to my satisfaction, I'm just making sure that I hold the elastic because I don't want to lose it. So I would also hold that place with my pin very well so that it stays in place, and then I would top stitch right there so it doesn't move further. I have made the top stitch, as you can see, so the elastic is now in place. So I'll take out my safety pin from the other end of the elastic like this, and I'll just take my time and adjust the elastic inside the elastic casing. So take your time to do this so that you don't end up stretching your elastic more than you should. So I'll be taking my time to do this, adjusting it, because the hard net is sort of like making the lining longer than the main piece. After adjusting the elastic inside the elastic casing, I will place the sleeves good sides to good sides like this, take it to my sewing machine, and I will sew the side seams by 1 inch downwards. I have sewn the side seams of the sleeves together, and this is what the first sleeve currently looks like. So after I was done with this sleeve, I did the same thing for the second sleeve. So this is what the second one looks like. I would like to make some adjustments on the sleeve. Initially, I used a 14-inch elastic, but to get the actual elastic that you need for your sleeve, please use half of your armhole measurement plus 1 inch. My armhole is 17, divided by 2 is 8.5, plus 1 inch is 9.5. So this will make the elastic balance perfectly in the sleeves. The next alteration I'd like to make is on the sleeve length. So I'll be decreasing the mid part of the sleeve and also the side seam of the sleeve. This is because the midpoint of the sleeve appears to be much longer than that of the side seam. So I'll just go ahead and decrease the both of them in general. So I'm going upwards by 5.5 inch from the midpoint of the sleeve, and from the point where I made the top stitch of the lining on the fabric, I would measure 2 inches rather on the side seam like this. Then from the side seam, I would make a curved connection to the midpoint of my sleeve, and after that I'll go ahead and cut that out. So whatever I do for this sleeve, I will do the same for the other sleeve. So I'm going ahead to repeat the same thing on the other sleeve, marking 4.5 inches upwards and 2 inches downwards along the side seam, and then I'll cut it out. Before I cut it out, I'll make sure that both the lining and the main fabric are aligned together, and then I'll cut. After cutting, this is the current state of the two sleeves. So what I have right here are the rest of the layers that I cut out of my hard net. That is the 7 and the 6 inches width of hard net. So I'm just going ahead to cut them at a random, making sure that I create beads that I'll use to stuff up the sleeves. So this is what they look like. And right here is the leftover net that I got while cutting the 3 layers of my hard net. So I'll go ahead and open my sleeves like this, and then I will stuff it up with the leftover pieces of hard net like this, making sure that I concentrate along or around the head of the sleeve. So that's that for that one. For now, I'll go ahead and also stuff up the second sleeve with the shredded net that I just made, also making sure that I concentrate around the head of the sleeve, because that is where the main puff effect is supposed to be. So I will adjust the lining inside the net like this and adjust it, and I'll make sure that they are equal. If they're not equal, I would try to adjust it, fill up the one that is not up to the other one, and just keep adjusting and adjusting. So once I'm satisfied with the puff effect of the two sleeves, I'll be making use of this orange bias to finish the hem of the sleeves on the outer part like this. So I'll do the same thing on this other hem. So this is what the finished hem of the sleeves look like. Now it's time to attach the sleeves to the main bodice of the corset. So this is the corset. I'll go ahead and open up the zipper allowance, and I would place the side seam of the armhole of the top to the side seam of the sleeve like this, and I will secure the 2 points with my pin, and I would also pin the sleeves to the upper part of the armhole like this, and I'll keep on repeating the same process towards the top of the armhole on the front part of the bodice. After I'm done securing the first sleeve, I will do the same to the second sleeve. So this is what it looks like. So what I'll do next is to take this to my sewing machine and sew the armhole area by a ½ inch all the way around. So I'll do the same for the second sleeve, all the way around by ½ inch. After sewing, this is what the armhole looks like. Please, if you have an overlocker, please overlock the raw edges. For me, my overlocker is unavailable for now. And with that, the corset top with high puff sleeve is ready. Please, if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you get alerted whenever I post new videos.